Maria was a simple woman who lived a quiet life in the city. Every day she woke up before the sun rose, preparing breakfast for her children and making sure they had everything they needed for school. She had two kids, a boy and a girl, and they were the reason she worked so hard. Maria never had the chance to finish her own education, but she wanted to give her children the opportunities she never had. Her job was not glamorous, but it was steady. She worked as a janitor in a large corporate building, where hundreds of executives and employees worked in tall glass offices. The building was beautiful, with shining floors and wide windows, but for Maria, it was just another place where she had to keep everything clean. She had worked there for many years, moving quietly from room to room, unnoticed by most of the people inside. The executives often walked past her without even a glance, too busy with their phones, meetings, or conversations about money and deals. Maria did not mind. She was used to being invisible. But sometimes, when she carried her mop and bucket into the grand boardroom, she would pause and look around. The boardroom was nothing like the small apartment where she lived. It had a long wooden table polished to perfection, leather chairs that looked expensive, and walls decorated with portraits of serious men in suits. Every detail in that room spoke of power and importance. For Maria, stepping inside always felt like walking into another world. One late evening, after most of the workers had gone home, Maria was asked to clean the boardroom. There was going to be a very important meeting the next morning, and everything had to be spotless. Maria pushed her cart slowly down the hall. The building was quiet at that hour, and the sound of her footsteps echoed softly against the walls. She opened the heavy door to the boardroom and looked around. The table was covered with papers and coffee cups, the floor had footprints from many shoes, and the windows had faint smudges. It was a big task, but Maria was used to hard work. She tied her apron tighter, picked up her mop, and began. As she worked, she thought about her life. She remembered the struggles she had faced as a single mother after her husband left years ago. She remembered the nights she stayed awake, wondering how she would pay the bills. And she remembered the promises she made to herself to never give up, to always do her best, no matter how small the task. Every swipe of the mop reminded her that she was not just cleaning floors, she was working for her children's future. Her hands ached sometimes, her back grew tired, but her heart remained strong because love gave her strength. The boardroom was so large that it often took her longer than any other room. Tonight, she moved carefully, making sure every corner was perfect. She polished the table until it shone under the dim lights. She wiped down the chairs one by one, imagining how many powerful people had sat there making decisions that could change the company or even the city. Maria sometimes wondered what it would be like to sit in one of those chairs, to be someone whose voice mattered. But she quickly shook the thought away. That was not her place, she told herself. Her job was to clean, and she did it with pride. The sound of the mop swishing against the floor filled the silence. Occasionally, she hummed a song to herself, one that her mother used to sing when she was little. It comforted her, reminding her that even though life was not easy, she still carried pieces of joy inside her. She moved to the far end of the room, dragging the bucket behind her, when she suddenly felt a wave of exhaustion. She leaned on the mop for a moment and looked out of the window. The city lights sparkled in the distance, cars moving like tiny stars across the streets. For a few seconds, she allowed herself to dream of a better life, of her children growing up strong and educated, of not having to scrub floors until her hands were raw. She sighed and returned to her work. No one ever noticed the effort she put into making the boardroom perfect. By the time the executives arrived in the morning, they only saw the gleaming surfaces and spotless floors, never the tired woman who made it possible. Sometimes that hurt, but Maria reminded herself that dignity was not about being praised, it was about doing the right thing even when no one was watching. And so she kept working, quietly and steadily, as she always had. The minutes stretched into hours as she finished each task with care. She picked up discarded papers, pushed chairs neatly into place, and wiped away every fingerprint from the glass. Her reflection stared back at her, and she saw a woman who looked older than her years. Lines marked her face, and her hands were rough from years of scrubbing. Yet there was also a quiet strength in her eyes, a fire that life's struggles had not been able to extinguish. She smiled faintly at her reflection before moving back to the center of the room with her mop. By now the boardroom was nearly clean, but the floor still needed more work. Maria dipped the mop into the soapy water and began to move rhythmically across the tiles. Her arms ached, but she kept going, focusing on each stroke. She had learned long ago that the only way to finish a big job was to take it one step at a time. As she moved, she thought again about her children. Her son wanted to be an engineer, and her daughter dreamed of becoming a teacher. These dreams filled Maria's heart with hope. She would do anything to help them succeed, even if it meant staying invisible in a room like this. The boardroom grew brighter as the cleaning lights reflected off the polished surfaces. Maria stood for a moment, stretching her back, and took in the sight of her work. The room looked beautiful again, almost like new. She felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had turned chaos into order. No one else might notice, but she did, and that was enough for her. As she prepared to finish, she thought about tomorrow. Important people would gather in this room, making decisions that might affect hundreds of lives. They would never know who had stayed late into the night to make sure the room was ready. Maria did not need their thanks. She only needed the strength to keep going, day after day, until her children had the future she dreamed for them. The night stretched on, and Maria kept working until every corner shone. Alone in that vast boardroom, she felt both small and powerful at the same time. Small, because she knew she was just one woman doing a humble job. Powerful, because she knew her work mattered in ways that could not always be seen. She did not realize it yet, but this night would soon change her life. Something unexpected was about to happen, something that would remind her that no act of kindness or effort ever goes unnoticed forever. Maria dipped her mop into the bucket again, wringing out the water before continuing across the long stretch of polished floor. The boardroom was nearly finished now, and she could feel her muscles aching from hours of work. She moved slowly but steadily, determined to leave the room shining before she left for the night. The building was usually silent at this hour, but tonight, a faint sound broke through the stillness. Footsteps echoed softly in the hallway, drawing closer. Maria froze for a moment, her mop paused mid-swipe. It was unusual for anyone to come into the boardroom this late. The heavy door creaked open, and a tall man stepped inside. He was not wearing a sharp suit like the executives she sometimes glimpsed during the day. Instead, he wore a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his tie hanging loose around his neck, and his shoes looked as if he had walked a long distance. He carried no briefcase, no fancy watch glinting on his wrist, just a calm presence that filled the room as he entered. Maria looked at him curiously, unsure who he was. He gave her a warm smile, one that did not carry the arrogance she had grown used to seeing in men who worked in this building. "Sorry if I startled you," he said gently. His voice was calm, with a kindness that made Maria relax. "I'm new around here. Thought I'd take a look at the boardroom." Maria nodded slowly, still holding the mop. "Oh, it's fine. I'm just finishing up. The meeting tomorrow, everything has to be perfect." The man glanced around the room, noticing the buckets, rags, and cleaning supplies scattered near the door. His eyes returned to Maria. "You've been doing all this alone?" She gave a small smile, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Yes, it's my job. Someone has to make sure the big bosses have a clean room to sit in." The man chuckled softly, not in a mocking way but as if he truly admired her dedication. Then, to Maria's surprise, he walked over to the mop bucket and peered inside. "Do you mind if I help?" he asked casually. Maria blinked in shock. Help? With this? She laughed nervously, thinking he must be joking. You'll get your hands dirty. People don't usually offer to do this kind of work. But the man did not move away. Instead, he gently took the mop from her hands, dipping it into the water with an easy motion. I don't mind dirty hands, he said. Besides, it looks like you've already done most of the hard work. I can at least help with the rest. Maria stared at him, still uncertain. No executive, no employee, had ever picked up a mop beside her in all her years of working there. She wanted to protest, to tell him he didn't need to, but something in his eyes told her he was sincere. So she let out a small sigh and stepped back, allowing him space. If you really want to, she said softly. The man grinned and began to move the mop across the floor. His strokes were uneven at first, and Maria chuckled quietly at how awkward he looked. You're holding it wrong, she said, stepping closer to adjust the handle. Here push, then pull back. It's easier that way. He followed her instructions carefully, nodding with a look of concentration, and soon his movements grew smoother. Ah, I see, he said with a laugh. You make it look easy. Maria found herself smiling more than she had in weeks. That's because I've been doing it for years. But it's not as easy as it looks. They worked side by side for a while, the sound of the mop swishing over the floor filling the silence. Maria glanced at him occasionally, still trying to figure out who he was. He did not seem like one of the usual office workers. There was something different about him, his calmness, his willingness to help, his lack of pretension. Most people in this building never even noticed her, yet here he was, helping her mop the floor as though it was the most natural thing in the world. So, what brings you here so late? Maria asked at last, curiosity getting the better of her. The man shrugged lightly. Like I said, I'm new here. Wanted to get a feel for the place before tomorrow. And besides, he gave her a playful smile, it's not every day I get to meet someone who knows how to make a room shine like this. Maria laughed, shaking her head. It's just cleaning. Nothing special. It is special, he insisted gently. You make this place ready for important people to do their work. Without you, they'd be sitting in a mess. That matters. Maria's laughter faded into silence as his words sank in. No one had ever said that to her before. She was used to being invisible, her work taken for granted. For the first time, she felt truly seen. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than you know. The man leaned on the mop handle for a moment, looking at her with genuine respect. You deserve to hear it. They continued working, and as the minutes passed, they began to talk more. Maria found herself telling him little pieces of her life, about her children, about the long hours she worked, about how she sometimes wished she had been able to study more when she was young. She spoke carefully, not wanting to bore him, but he listened attentively, nodding and asking questions. His interest felt real, not forced. Maria could not remember the last time someone had listened to her like this. And what about you? She asked after a while, wiping her hands on her apron. You said you're new here. What do you do? The man smiled faintly, his eyes thoughtful. I suppose you could say I'm just learning the ropes. Trying to understand how things work in this building. Every little detail matters, you know. Maria tilted her head. His answer was vague, but she did not press him. Perhaps he was just shy, or perhaps he did not want to bore her with talk of business. Instead, she laughed softly. Well, if you ever need lessons on mopping, you know where to find me. He laughed too, his warm voice filling the room. The sound made the large boardroom feel less intimidating, more human. They worked together until the last section of floor was finished, standing back to admire their work. The room gleamed under the lights, every surface shining as though brand new. Maria placed her mop against the wall and sighed with satisfaction. There. Ready for the big meeting. The man nodded, his eyes sweeping the room before landing back on her. You did an incredible job, he said sincerely. You should be proud. Maria blushed slightly, unused to such praise. It's just my job. It's more than that, he replied gently. It's hard work. And it matters. Don't ever forget that. For a moment, they simply stood there in silence, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Maria felt a strange sense of comfort, as though she had known him longer than just a few minutes. He seemed different from anyone she had ever met in this building. And though she did not know it yet, this man was not just the new guy. His true identity would soon change everything. As he prepared to leave, he gave her one last smile. Thank you for letting me help. It was an honor. Maria shook her head, smiling back. No, thank you. I've never had anyone offer to help me before. It meant a lot. He nodded, then walked out of the boardroom, leaving Maria standing in the glow of the polished room. She felt lighter somehow, as though a small piece of her burden had been lifted. She did not know who he really was, but she sensed there was something special about him. And in the days to come, she would discover just how true that feeling was. Maria left the building that night with a feeling she could not explain. The stranger's words echoed in her mind as she walked home under the city lights. It had been so long since anyone had treated her as more than just the janitor. The simple kindness of the new guy, who not only noticed her but helped her, touched her deeply. When she got home, her children were already asleep, their small faces peaceful as they lay in bed. Maria stood by their door for a long time, watching them breathe softly, and whispered a promise in her heart that she would keep working hard for them. She did not know why, but the memory of the man's smile gave her an extra spark of strength that night. The next day passed like many others. Maria spent her hours moving from office to office, vacuuming carpets, wiping desks, and polishing surfaces. Yet her thoughts kept drifting back to the man with rolled-up sleeves and kind eyes. She wondered if she would see him again. Perhaps he was just passing through. Perhaps he had been lost and stumbled into the boardroom by mistake. But something inside her told her he would return. She found herself scanning the hallways more often, half expecting to see him appear with the same easy smile. Later that evening, as she was cleaning a corridor near the elevators, she heard a familiar voice. "Looks like you never stop working," the man said warmly. Maria turned quickly, and there he was again, standing with his hands in his pockets, watching her with amusement. Her heart gave a small leap, though she tried to hide it. "Oh, it's you," she said, unable to stop herself from smiling. "I thought maybe you disappeared." He shrugged lightly. "No, I'm still here. Just trying to get to know the place better." His eyes glanced at the cleaning cart beside her. "Do you ever take a break?" Maria laughed softly, shaking her head. "Not really. If I stop, the work piles up. And then the bosses get angry. So, no breaks." "Well," he said, leaning casually against the wall, "then maybe I'll keep you company while you work. If you don't mind." Maria's smile widened in spite of herself. "If you really want to watch someone scrub floors, then sure. But I warn you, it's not exciting." To her surprise, he picked up a rag from her cart and crouched down beside her, wiping at a stubborn spot on the floor. "Excitement is overrated," he said with a grin. "Sometimes the simple things matter most." Maria shook her head in disbelief. She still could not understand why he wanted to help her, but she felt strangely comfortable in his presence. As they worked together, their conversation grew easier. She told him about the neighborhood where she lived, the small park where her children played, and the way the city looked from her tiny apartment window. He listened quietly, asking questions that showed he truly cared about what she was saying. At one point, Maria grew embarrassed by how much she had shared. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, looking down. "I must sound silly. I'm sure you have better things to do than listen to me talk about my life." But the man shook his head firmly. "Don't say that. You don't sound silly at all. In fact, I think your story is more interesting than most of what I hear in this building. You've faced real challenges, and you've kept going. That takes strength." Maria blinked at him, caught off guard. She had spent years believing her story was ordinary, not worth telling. Yet here was someone who found value in it. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of pride in herself, not just as a worker, but as a person. They continued talking as they worked, and slowly Maria began to laugh more freely. He teased her gently about the way she moved so fast with her mop, saying she could win a race if mopping were a sport. She teased him back, reminding him of how awkward he looked the first time he tried to mop. Their laughter filled the hallway, echoing against the walls, making the late-night cleaning shift feel less lonely. At one point, Maria asked him about his own life. "So what about you? You're new here, but you never really said what you do." The man paused for a moment before answering, choosing his words carefully. "I guess you could say I'm learning about this company from the ground up. I want to understand what it feels like for everyone who works here, not just the people in suits." Maria tilted her head, studying him. His answer was vague again, but it carried a weight she didn't quite understand. Still, she decided not to press him further. There was something about his presence that told her he was not an ordinary worker, but she could not figure out what it was. For now, she was simply grateful for the kindness he showed. They worked side by side until the corridor gleamed. As they finished, he set the rag back on her cart and looked at her with genuine admiration. "You know," he said softly, "most people here probably walk past you without ever realizing how important you are to this place. But I see it. And I want you to know I respect it." Maria felt her throat tighten with emotion. She quickly looked down, pretending to adjust her mop, but she could not hide the small smile that spread across her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you can imagine." Before leaving, he gave her a small nod. "Keep doing what you're doing. You're stronger than you think." Maria watched him walk away, her heart filled with a warmth she had not felt in years. She did not understand why the stranger cared so much, but she knew one thing: his presence made her believe in herself again. For once, she felt like she was more than invisible. In the days that followed, Maria saw him more often. Sometimes he appeared late at night, offering to help with small tasks. Other times he simply sat nearby, talking to her while she worked. Each conversation revealed a little more about him, though he remained careful not to share too many details about his position. He spoke about values, about respect, about how every person mattered no matter their job title. His words stirred something inside Maria, an idea that perhaps the world could be kinder than she had experienced. Her children noticed a change in her too. She came home smiling more often, her laughter returning to the kitchen as she cooked dinner. They teased her gently, asking why she seemed so happy these days. Maria only shook her head and said she had made a new friend. Deep inside, though, she knew it was more than that. It was not about romance or dreams of riches. It was about dignity. For the first time, someone had looked at her and truly seen her. What Maria did not know was that her new friend was watching her just as closely. He admired her strength, her patience, and the way she carried herself with quiet pride despite the hardships she faced. He knew she did not realize who he was, but he wanted it that way for now. He wanted to understand her without the barrier of titles or power between them. And with every passing day, his respect for her grew stronger. Maria continued her work, but it no longer felt as lonely as before. The late nights were filled with laughter, stories, and moments of quiet understanding. She did not know the truth yet, but soon she would. And when the truth came out, it would change everything, not only how she saw him, but how she saw herself. The next morning, Maria arrived at the building earlier than usual. She wanted to check the boardroom one last time before the important meeting began. The company had been buzzing all week with talk about the arrival of the new CEO. Everyone seemed nervous, from the security guards at the door to the assistants carrying stacks of files. Maria didn't know much about business, but she had overheard employees whispering about how this new leader was going to shake things up. Some people were excited, while others were worried. For Maria, it didn't make much difference. She only cared about making sure the room looked spotless, because that was her job. She pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, trying to stay out of the way as sharply dressed men and women hurried past, balancing laptops and cups of coffee. The air felt heavier than usual, filled with anticipation. When Maria opened the door to the boardroom, she let out a breath of relief. The long wooden table still shone from the night before, and the floor sparkled under the bright lights. She straightened a few chairs, adjusted the curtains slightly, and made sure the water glasses were in place. Everything looked perfect. She smiled to herself, proud of the work she had done. As she stepped back, she imagined what kind of man the new CEO might be. She pictured someone tall, serious, dressed in an expensive suit, with a cold expression on his face. In her mind, he would probably look at her the same way all the other executives did, with little more than a passing glance, if that. She shook her head at the thought, reminding herself not to care. "It doesn't matter," she whispered to herself. "They don't see people like me." Just then, voices echoed in the hallway. Maria quickly picked up her cart and moved out, not wanting to be in the way when the board members arrived. She stood quietly near the end of the hall, watching from a distance as men in dark suits and women in elegant dresses entered the boardroom one after another. Their conversations blended together, discussions about profits, projects, and strategies. Maria's eyes flickered from face to face, but she didn't see anyone she recognized from the night before. She sighed, telling herself not to expect it. Maybe the kind man she had met was just a worker passing through, someone she would never see again. Then the hallway grew quieter. The doors of the boardroom were closed, and everyone seemed to be waiting for something or someone. Maria leaned slightly forward, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't explain. She heard footsteps approaching. They were steady and confident, and soon the figure appeared. Her breath caught in her throat. It was him. The same man who had helped her mop the floor, the one who had listened to her stories, the one who had told her she mattered. But now, he wasn't just the new guy in rolled-up sleeves. He was dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his hair neatly combed, and his expression calm but commanding. A hush fell over the hallway as he walked past, and the boardroom doors opened wide to welcome him. "Ladies and gentlemen," one of the executives announced loudly, "please welcome our new CEO, Mr. John Anderson." Maria's eyes widened. She gripped the handle of her cart to steady herself. CEO. The word echoed in her mind, impossible to believe. The man who had scrubbed the floor with her was the head of the entire company. Her heart pounded as she watched him enter the boardroom, greeted by applause and respectful nods. For a moment, she felt dizzy, her thoughts spinning in disbelief. How could this be true? He had never once hinted at his position. He had acted like an ordinary man, not like someone who held so much power. Maria quickly stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, not wanting anyone to notice her shock. She pressed her hand against her chest, trying to calm her breathing. "The CEO," she whispered to herself. He was the CEO all along. Her mind raced through every conversation they had shared, every moment when she had spoken openly about her struggles. She remembered laughing with him, teasing him about how clumsy he was with the mop. A wave of panic washed over her. Had she said too much? Had she been too casual? What if she had offended him without realizing? The thought made her cheeks burn. Inside the boardroom, Maria could hear voices rising as the meeting began. Though she could not make out every word, she knew this was a moment that would shape the company's future. She leaned against the wall, torn between fear and awe. Part of her wanted to run and hide, to avoid the embarrassment of facing him now that she knew who he really was. But another part of her remembered the way he had spoken to her with kindness, respect, and sincerity. He hadn't looked down on her then. Maybe he wouldn't now. The meeting lasted for more than an hour. During that time, Maria busied herself in another corridor, though her thoughts never strayed far from the boardroom. She kept replaying the image of him walking in with such confidence, the applause that followed, the realization that he was in charge of everyone, even those who had always ignored her. When the doors finally opened again, people poured out, their faces animated as they discussed the CEO's speech. Some looked impressed, others looked uncertain, but one thing was clear: John Anderson had left a strong impression. Maria kept her head down as the executives passed, not wanting to draw attention. Then, through the crowd, she saw him again. He was speaking with a group of directors, his expression serious as they asked him questions. But as his eyes scanned the hallway, they landed on her. For a brief moment, their gazes met. Maria quickly looked away, her heart leaping into her throat. She hoped he wouldn't call out to her, not in front of everyone. But to her surprise, he excused himself from the group and walked directly toward her. Maria felt frozen in place, her hands tightening around the handle of her cart. Every step he took made her pulse quicken. She wanted to disappear, yet she could not move. When he finally reached her, his expression softened into the same warm smile she remembered from the night before. "Maria," he said quietly, as if greeting an old friend. "I was hoping to see you." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She stared at him, still struggling to reconcile the two images in her mind: the humble man who had mopped the floor and the powerful CEO standing before her now. You're the CEO," she managed to whisper at last. He nodded gently. "Yes. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to meet this place as it really is, not from behind a title. And I'm glad I did, because that's how I met you." Maria's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. She didn't know what to say. Around them, people were watching, their eyes wide with surprise. Executives who had never even glanced at her before were staring, wondering why their new CEO was speaking so kindly to the janitor. The weight of their attention made Maria want to shrink into herself, but John's calm presence gave her strength. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice meant only for her. "For your honesty, for your hard work, and for treating me like a person when you didn't know who I was." Maria swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I I was just doing my job." "And you do it with dignity," he replied firmly. "That's something many people forget to value." The words washed over her, filling her with a warmth she could not describe. In that moment, she realized that everything she had done, every late night, every quiet effort, had not been invisible after all. Someone had seen her. Someone had cared. Maria stood frozen in the hallway long after John returned to the boardroom. Her mind raced with disbelief, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite name. How could it be that the man who had mopped the floor with her, laughed with her, and listened to her stories was the CEO? She had seen him with her own eyes, walking into the room with the confidence of a leader, welcomed by applause and respect. Yet, he had come to her like a friend, without titles, without pride. The memory of him looking directly at her, thanking her in front of others, replayed again and again in her heart. That evening, as the building emptied and the lights dimmed, Maria continued her work quietly. She wanted to slip away unnoticed, unsure of how to face him again. But fate had other plans. As she wheeled her cart past the lobby, she heard his voice calling her name. "Maria." She stopped, her breath catching in her throat. Slowly, she turned, and there he was again, no crowd around him this time, no board members or executives, just the man she had first met. His tie was loosened now, his suit jacket draped over his arm, and his smile carried the same warmth as before. "I'm sorry if I startled you earlier," he said gently, walking closer. "I didn't mean to surprise you like that. I wanted to tell you the truth, but I also wanted to see this place through fresh eyes, without people treating me differently. Meeting you made that possible." Maria looked down at her hands, still rough from years of cleaning. "I don't know what to say," she admitted softly. "You're the CEO, and I spoke to you like you were just anyone." "That's exactly what I appreciated," he replied, his tone calm and steady. "You didn't treat me like a title. You treated me like a person. Do you know how rare that is for someone in my position?" Maria lifted her eyes slowly, surprised by his words. "But I'm just a janitor," she said. "I don't matter in this building the way others do." John shook his head firmly. "Don't say that. You matter more than you realize. Without people like you, this company would fall apart. You remind me of something many leaders forget, that respect should be given to everyone, no matter their job." His words touched her deeply. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. She had spent years moving through the shadows, unnoticed, her work taken for granted. Yet here was the most powerful man in the building, standing before her, reminding her that she had value. Her eyes stung with tears, but she blinked them away quickly, not wanting to appear weak. They walked together through the quiet lobby. John asked her about her children again, genuinely curious about their dreams. Maria spoke softly about her son wanting to become an engineer and her daughter hoping to be a teacher. She explained how she worked long hours to pay for their school fees, hoping to give them a future she could never have. John listened with the same patience as before, nodding thoughtfully. "You're giving them something greater than money," he said. "You're giving them an example of strength, of resilience, of never giving up. That is more powerful than anything else." Maria's chest tightened with emotion. She had never thought of herself that way. She only saw her tired hands, her aching back, and the endless hours of work. But hearing him speak made her feel proud for the first time in a long time. The next day, rumors spread quickly in the building. Employees whispered about how the new CEO had spoken to a janitor in the hallway, how he had called her by name, how he had treated her with respect in front of everyone. Some people were shocked, others curious, but Maria kept her head down, doing her work as always. She did not want attention. All she wanted was to keep providing for her children. But inside her, something had changed. She no longer felt invisible. That week, John made decisions that surprised the staff. He introduced new policies about workplace respect, insisting that every worker, whether an executive or a janitor, deserved recognition. He told his managers to spend time learning about the people who kept the company running behind the scenes. He wanted to change the culture of the company, and Maria knew that their late-night conversations had played a part in inspiring that. One evening, as Maria finished wiping down the glass doors in the lobby, she saw John waiting near the exit. He approached her with a gentle smile. "Maria, may I walk with you?" he asked. She nodded shyly, and together they stepped out into the cool night air. The city lights sparkled around them, and for a while they walked in silence, the sound of their footsteps echoing on the pavement. "I wanted to thank you again," John said finally. "You reminded me why I took this position. It's not just about numbers or profits. It's about people, every single person who gives their time and effort to this company. You reminded me that leadership is about respect." Maria looked at him, her heart heavy with gratitude. "And you reminded me," she said softly, "that even the simplest work has meaning." They shared a quiet smile, and in that moment, Maria realized that her life had been forever touched by this unlikely friendship. She would still wake up early each day, still carry her mop and bucket, still scrub floors until they shone. But now she carried something else with her too, a sense of dignity, a reminder that her work mattered, that she mattered. As weeks turned into months, Maria noticed changes in the building. Managers began greeting her by name. Executives nodded to her as they passed. The culture of the company shifted slowly but surely, and she knew it was because of him. But John never made her feel like it was about grand gestures. To him, it was simple: every person deserved to be seen. Maria never asked for recognition, but one morning she arrived to find a small envelope on her cleaning cart. Inside was a handwritten note from John. It read, "Thank you, Maria, for showing me the heart of this company. Your strength inspires me every day. John." Alongside the note was a voucher for her children's school fees, enough to ease her burden for the year. Maria's hands trembled as she held it, her eyes filling with tears. Not because of the money, but because someone had cared enough to help. She tucked the note carefully into her apron pocket and carried it with her from that day forward. Whenever the nights grew long and her body grew tired, she would touch the folded paper and remember the kindness she had been shown. It gave her the strength to keep going, to keep believing. Years later, Maria would look back on that night in the boardroom as the moment everything changed. She had been alone, cleaning the floor, believing she was invisible. Then a man had walked in, rolled up his sleeves, and helped her mop. She had not known who he really was, but she had treated him with honesty and kindness. And in return, he had reminded her that even the quietest voices can be heard, and even the humblest work can carry dignity. For Maria, it was proof that sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen in the most ordinary places. And though she remained the same simple woman, her life was forever brighter because one man who just happened to be the CEO had chosen to see her.